Okay, live, thank you.
Great. Got it. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this evening's meeting. It's a little different out there with the time change this month, so it got dark earlier, but it was nice and light this morning when I got up, so that was a bonus. So welcome to the ops agenda for Monday, November the 8th, and we would like the Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. And for any of the people watching or listening, there are 4 trustees on this committee, myself, Rob Painter, Nicole Duncan, and Angie Hensa. And if any of the other trustees do join us, I haven't seen any yet, but if they do, they're welcome to attend, but they would not have voting privileges at this meeting. So just so everybody's aware of that. Could I have approval of the agenda, please? Thank you, Trustee Duncan and Trustee Hensa. Any amendments to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as submitted? That's unanimous. Thank you. Could I have approval of minutes of October the 18th? Trustee Duncan, thank you very much. Any business arising from the minutes? Okay, could I have approval of the minutes then? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We have no presentations to the committee this evening.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Just for clarification, I abstained from approval. I was not in attendance at the October 18th, so I didn't think it would be appropriate in this case.
Thank you very much for that, Trustee Painter. Welcome back. Under the superintendent's report, I know that at the time of publication, we didn't have a student representative attending this evening. Could you just verify that that's the case still, or did we have somebody joining us this evening?
No, that's correct, Trustee Leonard.
Okay, thank you very much. We have nothing under personnel. We'll go to finance and legal affairs and whistleblower protection motion. This was first introduced at this committee December of last year, brought back in February of 2021, and sent away with the Secretary Treasurer to gather some information for us and bring it back as soon as that information was readily available. So if I could turn it over to the Secretary Treasurer, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. In your agenda pack-up, you have the latest version of the whistleblower policy. And as requested, a regulation has also been provided. Reviewing the notes from some of the past meetings, as Chair Leonard mentioned, the new version of the policy has softened in its language. It does compare to the 7 districts I looked at, and then I stopped looking, with almost identical language between the policy and the admin procedure or the regs. I followed a document called Best Practices in Whistleblower Legislation from Carol Ann Boydell on behalf of the BC Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. It meets the checklist requirements in that document for PETA, which is the legislation under which we're considering this policy tonight. I removed the section that said superseded by other legislation, as that seemed to confuse. I also removed the policy violation section and moved it to admin procedure. And as stated, this particular statement or clause in the policy or reg was present in all of the policies I looked at or regs. Along with the other stakeholders that are stated in the policy, there was a request to include students. I did not do that. I felt and thought there were enough checks and balances in the system. The student can go to a teacher or a principal or a vice principal or a parent, who are all stakeholders in the policy. And I also added an annual reporting section so that we can report out to the organization on the types of whistleblower and the number of whistleblower complaints that we receive. So looking for hopefully a recommendation to the board to approve this whistleblower policy.
Thank you so much. I'll start with Trustee Duncan and then Trustee Painter.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Leonard. Through you to the Secretary Treasurer. As I read, thank you so much for coming back and doing that additional research and work to bring back another draft for us. I do note that we have an administrative procedure, which I assume is really for our purposes an administrative, like a regulation, according to our board bylaws. And one of the things that really came across to me as I went through the process was really around the need to review the Ombudsperson's office guidance. I wondered whether you could clarify for us whether you've had an opportunity to review their guidance. Of course, they're the regulator that will be enforcing or investigating concerns under this new piece of legislation. They, as you may be aware already, have a really useful suite of guidance for public bodies that are trying to put in place a program and to introduce processes and to sort of inform their communities about the rights and the obligations under this new piece of legislation. So I guess before I talk about some of the areas where I think we could further develop the policy and the regs, I wondered if through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer, you could clarify whether you've had a chance to look at the Ombudsperson's guidance.
I reviewed the whistleblower protection provided by BCSTA Hub, in addition to the document I just cited. I also reviewed BCPC's instruction to us, where the PETA instruction came from. I reviewed the Ombudsperson resources on the web in terms of public interest disclosure resources. The same website for employees, how to report wrongdoing, also for employees, how to report reprisal, and thus ended the research that I did on this policy.
If I may.
Yep, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, so thank you, Secretary Treasurer, for that. So in light of that, I guess my suggestion would be that we include some further clarification around process then. I think we should be a little bit more clear about the options available to folks that do want to make a complaint, that they don't actually, that it is their choice to make a complaint through their organization or to make a complaint to the Ombudsperson, that they don't need to exhaust their organization's complaint process, that they can go straight to the Ombudsperson. I think it would be good practice to see us add a section setting out exactly how they would go about contacting the Ombudsperson. And then the other sort of concern I have, and that I'd like to see us work on tonight, is around the way that the process addresses complaints that might have to do with a senior official. So, you know, I think at the moment, it appears that there's nothing in the policy that clarifies how a concern will be addressed where the concern is about a senior official. So for instance, a trustee, the board, superintendent, a secretary treasurer, or any of their direct reports. At the moment, it appears that the individuals that are really responsible, you know, the head of the organizations, there's no way for individuals to put forward a complaint that has to do about wrongdoing by any of those senior officials or indeed by the board itself. So I think we need to spell out where there is a concern of wrongdoing involving a senior official or the board or a trustee, how an individual would go about addressing that concern. My suggestion would be that we advise in the procedure that that individual be directed immediately to the Ombudsperson's office to investigate the concern, but I think it's a conversation that we need to have.
Is that not the last line of the second paragraph under policy? That it's directing to a member of the senior leadership team or the ombudsman. So is that not covered off in what you're suggesting there? That's exactly what that says, according to what I'm reading.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting is that, in my view, is not sufficiently clear. The fact that we mention the ombudsperson is, in my view, not sufficient. I think what we need to say is that, spell it out. Right now, it doesn't specify that if a concern is in relation to a senior official, and in particular, I think the gap is, where the concern relates to the very officials that are cited here as being responsible for conducting reviews or investigations into complaints. I think we would be remiss if we didn't spell out, how to bring forward a concern relating to those individuals. And right now, by simply referencing the ombudsperson as an option, I don't think it makes it sufficiently clear what the process would be. And I do think that it makes sense that it would be to go straight to the ombudsperson's office, but I think we need to say that.
Trustee Painter?
Thank you. I do have a couple of points, although I will note that I did I did have the same thoughts as Trustee Duncan, and I do believe that, for senior staff and trustees, if there is a concern, that immediately referring that notice to the ombudsperson's office is beneficial for us, because that will essentially alleviate any concerns of conflict of interest or other misperceptions. I think it's a good way to keep our hands clean and make sure that there is clarity that at that level we don't get into investigating ourselves. I would note that it's addressed in the administrative procedures, but it's not here on the first page of the policy that a person may speak to their direct supervisor. And I think that's honestly, a lot of people who don't know us don't regularly work with senior administration. Direct supervisor is likely going to be somewhat less intimidating. I noticed as well that the opportunity to seek advice is one that is mentioned in the administrative procedure, but it's really hammered home in the act itself. And I think that's something that it might be useful to highlight in here. And then I'll get into that just a little later on. A suggestion that at the top of page 2 in that first paragraph, starting, if an employee files a report or raises a concern, I would suggest we add in the language good faith in there. It does get into it in the administrative procedure somewhat, in that it says if it's frivolous, vexatious, blah, 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 that, action may be taken. But I think here adding in that good faith really kind of summarizes the point that if it's not done in sincerity, that there is an opportunity for repercussions as a consequence. One thought I did have, and I guess this is more, well, here, I'll do this. I'll speak to the annual reporting, and then Chair, I would like your guidance.
Yes.
Do you want discussion on the administrative procedure at this time, or are we doing them separately? How would you like to proceed?
We're doing just the policy first, because that's the only thing that we really have to vote on. The regulations we can discuss, but there's not a motion required for that. So it might be more of a discussion for discussion purposes. So let's start with your annual reporting.
Okay, with in this case, the act itself is quite clear that the annual report is a public document. It's to be posted online. It's at para 38 and 39. So I would actually suggest that it would be inappropriate for this to be addressed at an in-camera board meeting because it does have to be a public document thereafter. So I think that needs to be addressed. With respect to the investigation, and this is something I would like to see in the policy where the board is actually directing it. I would like to see a notification of the board and / chair or vice chair immediately, as long as that is not likely to impair the investigation. We've already had one challenge with the ombudsperson's office where perceptions of what was a valid concern was not immediately shared with the board, to my recollection, only to my recollection. And we ended up with some confusion after the fact about whether it should have or should not have. So it seems to me that in this case, even before there's a determination about whether it falls under the act or it's vexatious, anything like that, that there is a reporting to the board at the time, and that the direction will be laid out. We feel this is vexatious for the following reasons. We feel that an investigation is required for the following reasons, and that within the investigation, I believe we need to split the procedures where we know that there is a clear indications of a legal offense. In the procedure, it refers to fraud and others. Where we have concerns about fraud, we should be involving the police at the first outset. I don't believe that we or our staff are in a position to start doing those sorts of investigations. So where there is a legal concern, I do believe that we should be involving the police right off. Within the internal, I do think that there should be a specific direction around how the procedure is undertaken. I recognize this is in the administrative procedure. I would make the recommendation that it goes through repeatedly that says it's either the superintendent or the secretary treasurer. I would make the recommendation that it always goes to the superintendent unless it's the superintendent themselves who is being investigated, in which case we should be looking at the ombudsperson anyway. My reason for stating that is that the superintendent is also required to hold a teacher's license. That's something that secretary treasurer is not. And I do believe that that additional responsibility and the experience with respect to working within the educational structure as a teacher, as an administrator, and then at district administration is something that really needs to be taken into consideration when we're looking at these investigations. One last point, the last paragraph on page 1, it makes mention of parents and volunteers being expected to come forward. Now, the whistleblower protection itself is aimed at employees, and with respect to concerns about reprisals against employees, loss of employment, loss of contract, things like that, I can understand why parents or volunteers aren't included in the legislation. However, I do believe we should be including in the policy direction that those same individuals will be protected from reprisals and liability in the same manner as anyone else, as long as it's a good faith claim and or good faith submission. I do think that's an important consideration if we're looking for those people to actually raise concerns. I do know that there are parents out there who, not necessarily understanding the way that the educational system operates, will want some sort of comfort, just as in reporting bullying, that there will be no reprisals either against them or the students that they are giving care for. I just want to take one last look and then I'll leave. I think that covers the majority of it. I still have some uncertainty about the distinction between a regulation and administrative procedure. I sincerely thought that something like this, where we are talking about investigations, formal procedures, that sort of thing, that this would remain a regulation. It was my understanding that administrative procedure would be something that is of an administrative nature. This to me is far more substantial than that. And perhaps at some point in time in the future, we could get some just formal clarification about what the distinction is between the two.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I just have a question, probably from the last, if I could direct this to the Secretary Treasurer. In the whistleblower policy part of it, when this is just on one of Trustee Painter's points, when it does include parents and volunteers in the second paragraph under policy, and then on the next page, it just talks about employees. Would it be prudent? It talks about employees will not face retaliation or anything, but it doesn't mention the parents or the volunteers in that paragraph. Would it be advantageous to just include that along with them so that they know that there's no reprisal or repercussions with them? Is it something that you had considered when you were doing the redraft from our discussions prior?
I have not considered it, and I would consider it at the committee's will.
Because we did ask that the parents and the volunteers be added in the second paragraph, but if we actually included them under the last paragraph just before annual reporting as well, a sentence about them, then that would cover everybody that we've asked to come forward if they would like to make any kind of a whistleblower claim, that there would be no repercussions or reprisals against any of those. So that would be my recommendation, would be to include that sentence in there. But that was the only thing that I'll just caution trustees that this has come to us twice, and we can't keep sending it back and make alterations every time it comes back and expect that we're ever going to pass this through committee and have something in place. There's nothing to say that we can't get something in place and then bring it back for alterations or amendments at some point in time. But we've now gone a year without this on the books, and it's really important we get something on the books, and we don't want to keep sending it back to committee. So Trustee Henza, before we move any way forward, did you have anything you would like to add?
No, thanks. Any comments I had have been covered already. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm just not sure how we're going to go forward right now. The motion is not on the floor. Did any of the stakeholders wish to speak to it before we try and craft a motion for the floor?
Thank you, Trustee Leonard. I do want to echo what Trustee Rob Painter had said, and we would like to have that to be clear that the would volunteers are concerned, but it would be more that there would be no negative impact on our students or the children that we give care for.
Right, and that would be implicit in what I was looking for as an addition there. Thank you. Any other stakeholders wish to speak to this? Okay, seeing no other hands. Okay, so if anybody wants to make an amendment to this, then now is your opportunity, because at the end of the day, we would like to take something to the board in 2 weeks. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to suggest a way forward. So I appreciate that this has come back to committee a couple of times and it's been many months since we saw it last, but this is the time it takes to craft policy and put together regulations. So I think there's a number of changes that we've discussed tonight, and I don't think that we can make those changes sort of on the fly, so to speak, unless the committee's prepared to put in some time tonight to make those changes. I think it might be more prudent to simply bring it back to December ops and allow the Secretary Treasurer to go away and make the changes that we've discussed tonight, unless, again, the committee thinks that we can make those changes on the fly tonight, in which case I'm certainly happy to take the time to do it tonight.
Well, first, and I'll go back to what I just said. So we sent the Secretary Treasurer away last time with all of the things that we wanted changed in this. So what I'm saying is we can't keep doing that every time at every meeting. So I know that some people have brought up some different things tonight, and unless we're giving the Secretary Treasurer direction and all of us are in favor of moving it forward and asking her to bring that forward, then it won't go anywhere. So if you want to bring forward a specific item that you would like the Secretary Treasurer to research and or wordsmith for us for the next meeting, then you need to put that forward in some kind of a direction or motion, because I've heard a lot from 2 trustees right now, and I'm not personally in favor of everything that's just come forward. So it's just not sending the Secretary Treasurer away to do work. So if you wanted to make a motion, Trustee Duncan, about or ask for direction and see if you have enough support to send that forward to the next meeting, then the Secretary Treasurer would be tasked to bring that forward.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for that clarification. And so to be clear, we had the policy come before the committee. I don't recall there being a regulation with that. And so am I correct to say
we asked her to bring forward the regulation to the next meeting.
Right. So the regulation is new. This is the first time that the committee's had an opportunity to consider it. And so I guess I'm just pointing out that, these things take time. And I think, it's about reasonable expectations. The idea that a regulation can come before a committee once in an area that is new and be signed off right away, I don't think it's necessarily one that we should assume. But from my perspective, there are some gaps here. If I was to make a motion to direct the Secretary Treasurer to do 3 things and then come back with those amendments to the December meeting of the Stant Ops. One would be to include clear direction for how an individual is to bring forward a concern involving a senior member of staff, a trustee, or indeed the board. Specify how to contact the Ombudsperson's office to initiate a complaint about both wrongdoing or a complaint about alleged reprisal. To specify in the policy that the complainant, if you will, for lack of a better term, is not obliged to use an internal process, but has the right to choose to go straight to the Ombudsperson's office. And I think the last thing would be to use the definitions wherever possible. So the definitions of wrongdoing, of reprisals, directly from either the Ombudsperson's guidance or the Act itself, just to ensure that all of our definitions are in line with the intended and stated purpose under the Act. And I guess the only other thing in terms of context is to say that there really are some great resources from the Ombudsperson that can assist us to kind of fine tune our own process. And I'm happy to share those resources with the committee and certainly with the Secretary Treasurer, although I'm sure that's not necessary.
So for clarification purposes, I'll just go back to where I started at the beginning. The policy is the only thing we have to vote on. Regulations we can ask to be brought back, because you're right, it is the first time we've seen them, and we can have a discussion about regulations if we want to change any of those. But let's just talk about the policy tonight. The regs we can have brought back, but let's just discuss the policy right now because that's what we've seen before, and that's included the changes that we asked for before. The regs is I agree with you, something new, but we could bring that back and have that discussion in December if we wished. So is there anything in the policy that you were looking at? And if some of the points that you made in the policy, are they not more better directed to be covered in the regulations as opposed to the policy?
I would suggest that they need to be in the policy, but again, I'm happy to hear from my colleagues and see whether they agree.
Okay. Oh, Trustee Painter, yes, I see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I recognize that I come at this from a provincial government perspective, where an act is a comprehensive document that lays out a great deal of different things. Regulations will provide some additional direction, some greater depth, but typically the expectation is that it's only those elements that are expected to be subject to change on an ongoing basis that would be fit into regulations. The entire structure is of, well, in my example, in the Act, is there and is solid. So the distinctions would be, in my mind, the things that may alter or may require amendment on an ongoing basis. Simply putting them in there makes it an easier process to keep those things up to date. So with respect to notification of the board at the time that concerns have been raised, I believe that should be in the policy. It specifically relates to the relationship between district administration and the board. That's not something that should be changed on an ongoing basis. I believe that we need to have the clarity about, as you have mentioned, and as VC PAC chair or president, I'm not sure which chair you are.
She's the president. She's the president.
President, all right, I'll try to stick with that. Concern from reprisals are there. I do believe that the annual reporting is inconsistent with the Act itself, which states that it must be a public document. So I do believe there's some work here. I am happy to sit down and put together recommendations like the ones that I've just presented, not trying to go for another swing at it, but just the ones that I've raised tonight. I'm happy to put that into writing and put it forward as a suggestion for consideration in December. I'm happy to defer to the Secretary Treasurer in terms of drafting that independently, because I know that the Secretary Treasurer has heard my comments and can move forward from that. But I wouldn't be prepared to recommend this to the board at it in its present form.
So a question for the Secretary Treasurer. Under the reporting, can you, was there a rationale that it was in camera as opposed to a public document in the research that you did?
No, I think it was probably a comparison to other districts, but I don't think it's a sticking point in terms of changing it.
Okay. And with regards to some of the other comments that have been made, was there any issues with anything that's been brought forward so far, or from Trustees Duncan and Painter? In changes that you heard that would be possible or not possible in the policy that's before us?
The policy is the board's policy.
Okay, so anything that's been brought forward is doable, is that what you're implying?
Yep, it's the board's policy, so.
Okay, so where are we here? Are we sending? I don't want this to hang around forever, guys. This is not something that we have nothing on the books for whistleblower protection currently. Secretary Treasurer.
Might I suggest that the two trustees with the main concerns draft a memo for the December ops meeting in order, or redraft the policy to suit their needs and make those proposals?
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, I'm happy to if the document can be shared with me in a way that I can make amendments, that would be fantastic. And in the meantime, I'm also happy to share the guidance and good practice that helps public bodies to deal with this new area of law.
So if we can task you and Rob to actually get together, so we're not having things come out of left field at the next ops meeting, if the two of you can get together and do your drafting so that all of your points are on a document that we can review and maybe move that forward, that would be awesome. Okay,
Happy to.
that good for everybody? Secretary Treasurer, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to bring this forward. We're going to table it tonight to have the discussion, further discussion on December, whatever night it is. I think it's ad ops in December, so. Okay, all those in favor of moving it forward to December? Okay, thank you very much, and that's carried. Okay, moving along, we are going to shops report, Secretary Treasurer.
Yes, thank you, Chair Leonard. This is the second installment of the shops report, originally brought to you in December of 2020. Included in the report is a recommendations update so that you can see the status of each of the recommendations that we brought forward. There's a equipment replacement schedule update, as well as a safety equipment status report within the report. And after tonight, the implementation of the administrative procedures and flow charts will be completed at the next level PVP meetings. And in terms of producing this report and the massive amount of work that went into last year's, once again, thanks to the shops team, especially Marnie Vistis and Harwood in terms of report writing, and Colin Roberts in terms of the administrative procedures.
Great, thank you very much. It is a very comprehensive document, and it's nice to see that some of the you can clear to see what's been complete and what is ongoing. Any discussion from anyone? Trustee Duncan and then Trustee Painter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to staff for bringing this forward again. I wondered if we could go to page 118 of the packet. There's a note on page 118 that says the following schools are responsible for providing the following safety items in all shops. Facilities will work with shop teachers to obtain a list of items needed and have this purchased in a timely manner. And then there's a list which includes hearing protection, fire blankets, protective clothing, eye protection, first aid supplies, intercom, office contact, and strobe lights. I wondered through the chair to either the Secretary Treasurer or possibly a member of the facilities team, whether we could get some clarity about whether or not there's funding in place to ensure that these items and the other outstanding items that we'll discuss later on the agenda can be purchased, and what the timeline is associated with purchasing those items and ensuring they're in all of our shops.
Secretary Treasurer.
So I'll ask Marnie Vistis and Harwood to comment, but I would start off by saying that just like any other courses or supplies for schools, these expenses are attended to through the district allocation to the school in terms of learning supplies and resources. The necessity to have these, I think, has been communicated to principals and vice principals, and therefore they understand that they are to maintain these items as part of a safe shop. And Marnie, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
No, just about the strobe lights. We are completed all the middle schools now, and we have everything in line for the high schools. We just have to get there and do it. So that's on our November to-do list.
Great. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, if I may ask a follow-up, Chair, through you to the Secretary Treasurer. I just want to clarify. So essentially, we're waiting for principals to attend to those items, and so the responsibility lies with principals to ensure that those items are in the shops. And then from a district level, what kind of, who's got responsibility for overseeing and ensuring that those items are in fact in the shops? I mean, I guess my concern is that we, these audits, were done many years ago. And, I appreciate that there's a significant investment to address over the long term all of the issues. However, there are, in my view, some quick wins. And I think some of these items, there's certainly, I think, a reasonable expectation that they're going to be in shops, and that we're not going to need to wait for those items to be in shops. So I guess I just want to leave tonight being certain that there's clarity around ultimately who's responsible for ensuring that the funding is there, that it's used to address those items, and that in fact every shop now has all of those items in it.
Secretary Treasurer?
So it's my understanding that the responsibility has been relayed to principals and vice principals, and interim deputy superintendent could communicate or confirm that, or Marnie Vistis and Harwood could. It's my understanding that in the shops report, the safety equipment is either in place or is in progress within the blue tables in the report. In terms of responsibility, principal, vice principals responsible for their building and the programs that happen within it. Through the monthly inspection process, there's some housekeeping inspection to be done by the teacher and taken to their principal if any concerns, as well as an inspection done by facility staff to ensure the proper use of the shops. I don't know, Marnie or Colin, if you have anything to add.
I don't.
The initial safety report by the contractor was shared with the principals and vice principals in meetings back in the spring of 2021. And there were follow-up meetings with all of those members of staff later in the spring that year. So they were actually able to address some of those issues directly with the contractor. But when we will be following up with middle school and high school principals and vice principals in the fall, we certainly can take that as an opportunity to reinforce that message to ensure that has not been forgotten.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Painter?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a vocabulary question for page 17 of the package. It's the wood shop overall safety status table. And the second column from the right, it mentions conflagration zone signage. And honestly, I thought this might be something out of Calvin and Hobbes, but I wasn't quite sure. And I couldn't find it online, so I thought I'd get clarification.
I'll let Marnie clarify, but I believe it's the spacing or the lines around equipment showing where there should not be overlap, whether you're moving around or working at a particular machine. But Marnie, maybe can you verify what that word means, please?
Yeah, it's mainly outside with the dust collector. So if there is a fire, there will be a fireball that goes up to the sky. So there's a safety zone outside where you shouldn't park your car, or students shouldn't gather. Make sure that they're safe.
Would I be correct in understanding that would be conflagration, that we might have an extra U in there?
Yeah, that could be right.
Okay. Thank you. I was wondering if it was that or congestion, or it could have been a couple of things. Just a general question. On page 19, there's reference to Ministry of Advanced Skills Education and Training, that they provided a youth trades capital equipment program. And I was wondering if that was a one-time only funding source, or if that's something on an ongoing basis. I recognize that we're not going to be the only district that was faced with significant upgrades to its shops, and if this is an ongoing source, or if we're now expected to manage our own expenses from now on.
Secretary Treasurer.
Yeah, the Youth Trades and Training Equipment Grant was, I think it was multi-year, perhaps 3 years, about 5 years ago, and it was considered a one-time envelope.
Okay. And then my last question is, with respect to work moving forward, is there any decision around prioritization for shops that are identified for training over exploration, or does that come into the consideration at all?
Secretary Treasurer.
I will ask Marnie that in terms of her recommended equipment replacement.
When we first looked at it, when we were looking at moving the equipment, the ones that had higher priority were the higher trade shops. But as far as purchasing equipment, there is no priority. We're trying to get it so all the equipment is safe out there. If that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have no further questions, Chair.
Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the use of the administrative manual. It's referred to a number of times, and so my understanding is that the administrative manual will be where some of the supporting documents and process-related items will be kept. And I just wanted to clarify whether that manual is complete and accessible now. We had a number of conversations over the last couple of years about it being a work in progress, and I just want to confirm that it is complete and accessible now.
Secretary Treasurer.
As indicated, the administrative procedures as well as the flow charts and instructions will be final at the next leveled meetings at middle and secondary.
Oh, pardon me, through the chair, just to clarify my question. My question was actually whether the administrative manual is a living document that is available now and complete. We had a number of conversations over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, about the administrative manual itself being a work in progress, not yet finished and not yet available for the board to look at. And so I just wanted to clarify that we're now past that, and the administrative manual does exist. It's a finished document, appreciating, of course, that the shop related items will be added once they've been finalized.
The administrative procedure manual is still a work in progress. However, to advance the safety of shops, we are formalizing the finalization of these administrative procedures.
Yeah, so where would folks, I guess, where would folks access the administrative procedures manual then? Or how would they access it?
That's to be decided in terms of it being a work in progress and not finalized. These APs will be available to principals and vice principals to provide to their staff after the next level of meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this comprehensive and very large report. Lots of information in there. And as always, we look forward to that we make through the different recommendations there. And just to recap, the recommendations came out of the document, and we're moving through them as time and dollars permit and staffing permits. So we hope to get through all of the items as soon as we can. So we thank you so much for all the reporting. We're going to look now at E3, which is the 2022-23 Budget Advisory Committee draft terms of reference. And just for everybody's information, we're not discussing this as a group of trustees this evening. We're going to hopefully just have it on in the agenda for the last look at it before it goes to the budget committee next week. So in terms of input or stakeholder input, I think that's more what we're looking for this evening for anybody that might not be at the meeting next Monday. So if stakeholders have any input as to items on the terms of reference that you'd like to see different than what's before you, the budget committee will be meeting for the first time next week, and we will be discussing this and adopting a terms of reference next week. So trustees, I'm going to ask you to not speak at this point in time, because we will get our opportunity next Monday when the whole committee is there. So I'd like to see if there's any of the stakeholders who have any input into this tonight, because you might not necessarily be somebody that's attending the meeting next week. So do I see any hands or any issues for that? Angela.
Thank you. It's pretty comprehensive. I couldn't see any issue with it for us. We're actually really excited to be sitting at the table for this process. So we want to thank you for that. But the terms of reference look fairly comprehensive to us. We had no concerns.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other hands that I can see here? Okay, great. Well, we look forward to that meeting next week. That'll be our first budget meeting next Monday night for all the stakeholders and committee members. So we look forward to that, and we will hopefully pass our terms of reference next week and get on with our budget committee meetings going from there. Under facilities planning, E1 operations update. Is that Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Morris.
Good evening. You have before you my offerings for this month. We're plodding along and getting everything done that we need to respond to in as timely a fashion as possible. One of the things I've added to this report was my tour of Lampson School, as per request from one of the trustees, I think. So Lampson School, when I entered the building, I waited in the front foyer for a principal to greet me. When she came out, just prior to her coming out, I was noticing the original wallpaper everywhere on the inside of that building, and it's in remarkable condition. Walking throughout the building with her, it was very nice to see that everything I looked at and the rooms that I entered were kept up. They were clean. I didn't see any gouges in the walls or anything, actually. So the school is in good condition. The exterior, same thing. I walked around it. I looked at the grounds, made note of the grounds as well. And there's nothing there that caused me any concern.
Great, thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to highlight in your report, or should I just open it for questions?
You can open it for questions, Chair. It's almost similar but updated from the last report, just because of the volume of work we have.
Great. Okay, any questions for Mr. Morris? Mr. Painter.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through the chair to Director Morris. Recognizing the accessible playgrounds under minor capital on, I've got 138 in the package. Good to see that we've got the accessible rubber play surfaces. I would expect that this is this sort of like a solid mat, so it's something that can easily be accessed by wheelchairs or students with limited mobility.
Through the chair, I believe that is the case. I think it's a poured rubber mat. Marnie may correct me if I am mistaken. That's my understanding, and most of these approvals we get from the ministry are like that. They're for all people.
Arnie, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Northridge has, they use the money a little bit differently with two separate playgrounds, both have the rubber surface. That's Northridge. Lake Hill did it a little bit different. They have an area that's just for wheelchair accessibility. And then to cut a little bit of cost, they have some play area that someone with mobility issues couldn't necessarily play on. So they used wood chips in that area. But both the playground have accessibility components to them. And the kids can either easily get to the playgrounds now and onto play equipment, which is really nice.
Thank you. If I could just follow up on that one point, I was curious about. I didn't think it was something that had been necessarily specified, but without necessarily having to be accessible equipment, there is equipment that a student with limited mobility or other challenges is still able to engage with in the areas where they can access. Is that the intent?
100%. We want every child to be able to play regardless of their ability. So there's something, we work with the PAC and the principals and the teachers to pick the play equipment so all the kids have an opportunity. So every school
Perfect.
looks a little bit different.
No, I can understand that. Thank you. With respect to the spectrum, sorry. Vic High on Topaz, I understand there's some work being done, or maybe some boiler work being done there. Did I miss that, or is that still underway?
Through the chair.
Yep.
One of the new boilers had a module fail. So they flew it out from wherever the location was, they were able to acquire it. And our staff replaced it last week and they got their heat back up and running as quickly as possible.
Oh, perfect. My son has a teenage metabolism, so he didn't apparently notice, but I know that others in the building would. And then my last question is just, and I hope this doesn't catch anyone off guard. It's not my intention. Cedar Hill. I wasn't quite sure, just in the way the language is going out about receiving input on planning, et cetera. Is the PDR document for Cedar Hill, has that been finalized at this stage?
The PDR was
Sorry,
Kim.
whomever, Mr. Morris or Secretary Treasurer Morris, who's ever like to answer can.
I'll take a stab at that one. So the PDR was submitted prior to project approval in its final form. And so we don't submit another PDR now once the project is completed.
Okay. And then just the follow up to that, is that document now available for internal review?
Internal review by
trustees, I mean.
Yes, it could be taken to an in-camera meeting.
Okay. I guess I'll action that in some form. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Morris? Okay, thank you very much.
I have a number of questions.
And now, hi, Esther, are you referring to the update for facilities, or are you referring to the next item, which is Vic High?
Okay. I heard Vic High mentioned, so I thought it was a general discussion about facilities. So yes, I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay, that'll be the next item. So any other questions on the update facilities? Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. And first, I'd like to thank Mr. Morris for updating us on his inspection at Lampson. Much appreciated. I know there's numerous opportunities to inspect the sites just to make sure that they're being maintained. And so I appreciate you following up so quickly. Just a couple of questions around Cedar Hill. I wondered if we could get an update on the status or the timeline associated with getting a net zero costing completed.
Board requested that at its November board meeting, and that will be delivered on November 22nd.
Thank you. And then the other question I had was around plans around boilers or heat pumps rather. I wonder at Spectrum and Lambrick if we can get some clarity around the plans around heat pumps, whether they'll be gas or electric.
I would give that question to Mr. Morris.
There's a new boilers have gone into Spectrum, and they would be condensing boilers, and they are gas. And I'm sorry, what was the other school?
Lambrick.
Lambrick. I don't have an answer on that. Marnie may.
We haven't started the official plans on it, but right now the plans were to change them to condensing boilers, and we do have an opportunity to leave space for pumps in the future if that's the direction we want to go. So there is still lots of discussion about that.
Thanks for clarifying that they're boilers. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's, thank you very much, Mr. Morris. As always, a very detailed report, lots happening in the district. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We're moving on to the next item, which is Vic High update. And we'll turn it over to Mr. Morris again.
I just may ask Marnie to walk through it to give you, she's a lot closer to that one right now than I am.
Sure. Okay, Marnie.
Yeah, the project is progressing nicely. We're on budget. We're on schedule now. We are looking at completing the shoring. So the worst of the shoring and the seismic should be completed early in the new year, and then we'll start putting the school back together. So there'll be lots of different lots of stuff happening in the new year. We have also got the proposal together for the site plan, and we're just working on that right now. Yeah, so it's progressing really nicely.
Okay. So any questions for this report? I'll get to Esther in a second. Anybody else have any? Trustee Painter?
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if I could just get some clarification. I think it's more of a terminology issue than anything else. The Vic High seismic fees 2020. So my interpretation is that this is the funding envelope that is intended specifically for the structural reinforcement, the pouring of concrete, and the shoring up, as Marnie just referred to. Am I on the mark in that regard?
Marnie?
The fees are also the architect fees.
Okay.
Any of the consultant fees also go into that budget line item.
Okay. With that in mind, I noticed we're a little bit over at this point, which is life with an old building. Are we expecting additional costs within that particular line item?
Yeah, there just hasn't been a budget transfer yet. So there is some money that will come out of the construction pocket and construction budget and go into the fee budget. So it's not actually in a deficit. There just hasn't made that. Finance hasn't made that yet.
Okay.
Oh, so out of seismic construction and into seismic fees, is that?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anything
I think that's all I had for that at this point. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, we've got Esther. I believe you had some questions.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my camera doesn't seem to be functioning. I do have a number of questions. I asked a question on September 20th, 2021 this year, and I don't believe that it has been answered. I can restate it. It says on page 25 of the agenda, the proposed lease of land is described as high risk financially. However, Secretary Treasurer Morris confirmed this evening that the ministry has freely given the district a considerable sum of money to offset additional costs. the district is so able to access extra funding, why wasn't extra funding pursued to offset the claim shortfall of 2.6 million? And there are other parts, but that is the question. Has that been answered?
Secretary Treasurer?
So I think it was the Associate Director of Facilities that reported on the budget, but I do understand the question, I think. And so within the construction announcement of 76 or 79 million, I think it's 79 on the report, or in the project announcement, we have put in to the ministry for a certain amount of that total cost of construction. And so the additional money to bring us up to the total project cost is applied to from time to time from the ministry as progress goes along. So it's not new money, or we can't ask for money to cover the 2.6, but within the funding envelope announced, I think in June 2019, we have not drawn down all that money or applied for it. And as construction progresses, we apply for the full amount of that funding as we go.
Is there a reason that it's taken 6 weeks for that question to be answered?
What was the format it was sent in?
I sent it in the evening of the SD61's meeting, of the board meeting on September 21st.
To the board meeting, so that would have been, the chair was answering questions that evening, so I'm not quite sure why it wasn't answered, but certainly that would be a question for the chair, who's not in attendance this evening. But she was answering the questions that she could answer throughout the meeting, and then there's usually a follow-up if they can't be answered at that meeting. But I'm not quite sure where that got lost in
Thank you.
scope of things. But
Okay, well,
another question.
I have many. The proposed daycare requires 1.4 million, leaving 4.6 million of the total 6 million in the NLC funding for other purposes. 700,000 is being used for Vic High Stadium upgrade. My question is, why wasn't all the remaining funding, NLC funding, directed towards the well-established plans for Vic High Stadium upgrade?
So the child care portion of the Vic High site is being funded by MCFD New Spaces funding and not by the NLC budget within the Vic High envelope. The NLC amenities are going to be the artificial turf field, the astronomy deck and outdoor classroom, expansion to the servery for community use, and a meeting space / classroom and dedicated office space for the Intercultural Association.
Okay, my question, however, was, why wasn't all the remaining funding directed towards the well-established plans for Vic High Stadium upgrade?
The NLC money was assigned to the amenities that I just mentioned, and that was attended to through meetings with various community partners like the NRG and the Neighborhood Association, as well as ICA, as well as in discussions with the principal. And that is how those NLC amenities came about.
And after the public input as to what the community wanted as amenities, then the school board voted on it. And once we voted on it, then that's how the money was parceled out.
Okay, well, the public was, I'll get to it in a minute, but the public was never actually consulted about the ICA building. And also in the amenities survey, it was stated that funding would be used for the astronomy deck. So it's interesting that it seems NLC funding is actually being used for the astronomy deck. Is that correct?
My understanding that the NLC will go toward an Indigenous component of the observatory deck.
Do you have another question, Esther?
I have several, thank you. The public was not consulted or notified about the district's plans to use a significant portion of the NLC funding for a purpose-built facility for the ICA, documents indicate that negotiations began after the Vic High Alumni Association agreed to the proposed modifications of the stadium plans, believing, apparently, that funding was not available. The alumni had conducted extensive consultations with the public regarding plans for the stadium upgrade. Why was the public not informed or consulted about the district's plans to construct a purpose-built facility for the ICA on Vic High grounds?
I think there's a lot of information, a lot of statements in that question, so I need to see it in writing in order to answer it fully, Esther.
I can put it in the chat. But ultimately, the question is, why was the public not informed or consulted about the district's plans to construct a purpose-built facility for the ICA on Vic High grounds?
So the ICA is intended to, an NLC is intended to provide service to the school community that it uses on an ongoing basis. We know that Vic High has a high number of immigrant or new citizens to Canada, and that ICA is in the building almost all the time in terms of providing those services to students and families. And so it was a natural extension of the services that are already being provided in the school to provide that space to ICA to further the service to students and families in the school.
Who will be using the proposed or the purpose-built facility during school hours, please?
The meeting space / classroom will be available to ICA and to Vic High staff and students.
So Esther, do you have another question?
Thank you. I have several. Will students have classes in the facility during school hours?
The use of the building and timetabling of courses is at the principal's discretion.
Okay. Another question, Esther?
Why did the district, this is another question, why did the district agree to have 2 one-story buildings constructed on Vic High's land, the ICA and proposed daycare run by the Fernwood NRG?
I'm not sure who's able to answer that one.
So I don't think that the ICA section is separate from the building. I don't know if Chuck or Marnie can answer that. I believe it's built into the Vic High reno, and the childcare portion to be run by the local childcare provider. Again, is through MCFD New Spaces funding, and in School District 61, we supply those through learning studios or our manufactured portables.
And to continue through the chair, the ICA is not a separate building. It's within the high school itself.
So the only 2 little buildings we're talking about are the 2 learning studios and for daycare, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
From what I understand, the building for the ICA is a separate facility. It may be adjacent and may share a wall with the school, but it has its own alarm system, entry, passage, etc.
So the question's been asked and answered. So can we move on to the next one, please?
Well, I'm trying to clarify, but thank you. When will the public, or pardon me, the proposed site of the daycare is on the green space and garden area on the north end of Vic High. When will the public be consulted about the proposed daycare?
Secretary Treasurer?
It's at our discretion where we place the portables or learning centers on the site. I believe Marnie has an update from meeting with the garden group. I don't know, Marnie, if you want to provide an update on that.
Yeah, we're fortunate that we actually don't have to move the garden at all. We can put it more towards the east, and then the gardens can stay as they reside.
Okay.
So, in other words, from I've seen 2 or 3 possible configurations. So that configuration towards the belfry would block the view to the square, would it not?
They're about 25 to 30 feet away from the belfry. So I'm not sure what you mean by blocking the view.
Well, currently students have, as they're walking towards the north end of the school property, have a full view of the square, and it's a nice open feeling. So I'm wondering if this proposal blocks that view.
The school view or the road view?
The view of the square, of the Fernwood Square.
No, they'll still get some of the view.
Some. Okay.
Well, the pathway is all there, so that there's about 10 feet on either side of the pathway, if not more. We're still determining the placement of it, so some of these questions are hard to answer till we get the exact placement.
Okay. It's interesting. I read some documents about Oak Bay High's experience of their seismic upgrade, and they were thoroughly consulted about the NLC facilities. I believe they had at least 2 or 3 consultations. I'm wondering why it's so different for Vic High.
Do you have another question, Esther?
That was my question. And yes, I have another.
Sorry.
Go ahead. The NLC amenities were identified through conversations with community partners like the childcare provider, ICA, et cetera.
But not the public.
Next question, Esther.
I thank you. I have asked a question. The public was not consulted. Am I correct?
The public education partners in the neighborhood were consulted. The overall neighborhood come one, come all, what do you think of this, did not occur for Vic High.
But it did for Oak Bay. Can the district explain why?
I'm not sure the process for Oak Bay. I was not here at the time. I don't know if anybody, Chuck or Marnie were, and why it happened the way it did. I do know that the school district has very little access to the Oak Bay NLC, and that that's largely through the city that NLC is operating, and that the school district has very little access to that, and so did not want to repeat that type of NLC model for Vic High, where we wanted the school to be able to take advantage of the amenities as much as the community.
So it has a different function than the Oak Bay one. Esther, next question.
The second half of the Burnside report was due in June, then moved to October 2021. Was the second part made public?
Not at this time.
Can the district explain why, please?
It's at the board's discretion to move from in camera into open.
Well, the public was told that it would be available in June 2021. So
and when the board is ready to move it out, it will be, but obviously the board hasn't made that decision yet. And so it's not on the Secretary Treasurer's shoulders for that one, it's on the board. So I can't answer that, I'm only one member. So if you could ask your next question, that would be great.
How much of Vic High's funding is for SJ Willis, including contingency funding for SJ Willis's upgrade, please?
How much of Vic High's funding was for SJ Willis?
Yes, please.
I believe that's in the Vic High report. It's around 5.8 or 9 million, I think.
Right.
5933.
Pardon me?
5,933,000. It's on page 141 of the packet.
Okay, I'm just wondering if that's the core amount or if it also includes the contingency fund.
That's the total amount spent on SJ Willis as a result of the Vic High funding announcement.
Okay, thank you. And when do you anticipate, please, that the second half of the Burnside report will be ready?
Whenever the board makes that decision. So it's not up to the Secretary Treasurer, it's up to the board. And I can't answer that question.
Well, it's confusing for the public because I believe it was the Secretary Treasurer who made that commitment to the public.
Correct, but if the public, if the board still has it in camera, she can't release it until we allow it to be released, and we have not done that yet.
Okay, so then is this an issue of transparency?
I can't answer that question because it's the purview of the board, and I'm only one.
Perhaps the Secretary Treasurer can answer that question, please. Is this an issue of transparency? Why is it not available to the public, please, when it was promised in June 2021?
If you've looked at our agenda this evening, there's lots of things that we say we're going to bring forward, and they miss a deadline, they miss a target because of other things that are happening in the district. So probably this is one of those things. So it's not a transparency issue, it's a timing issue, and we've heard your comments, and we will relay them to the rest of the board. But there's nothing that any one of us can answer that question about right now because we're not the board. We are individual trustees at this meeting. Do you have any further questions for us?
No, not at this time. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So if there's no other questions about the VICI report, and seeing none, we will move on to information technology for learning update. I'm not sure who's tackling that one.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. I will tackle that one, and appreciate the opportunity to speak and give an update on behalf of the Information Technology for Learning Department. I'm going to share my screen and run through a presentation this evening, and then happy to take questions afterwards. Now, I should be able to provide my own tech support to share the screen here. One moment, please. There we go. We should be looking at the opening slide of the presentation now. So again, thanks for the opportunity. One of the things I wanted to speak to regarding IT for Learning in our department was how we align with the strategic goals, because it's not an obvious on the surface alignment, yet we still see very strong bonds with the strategic goals of the organization. One thing you'll notice is the word technology does not feature in the new strategic plan, and nor should it. But there are other elements that relate directly to the work that we do that I wanted to speak to. So, for example, develop and support is one of the key pieces within the strategic plan. And when we think about developing and supporting projects, that's where our work really supports around lifecycle management, intuitive workflows, privacy assessments, and guarding against cybersecurity threats. Again, engage and collaborate is another key piece of the strategic plan. And the tools to enable that engagement, these are digital tools now. This is regarding ease of use for staff. This is about the use of mobile technology and bandwidth for video, infrastructure for fast performance. All of this enables engagement and collaboration. When we think about the words critically examine, to us, that means providing better data analytics, providing information trends and visualizations, meaningful reports, and the quality of data. And when we look at learning opportunities from the staff point of view, there's digital instructions, online training, and enabling a community of knowledge, all areas where we're supporting the organization. And regarding addressing the inequity from a technology point of view, standardizing service and support, but also being able to target resources where more focus is needed. I have shown the trustees this framework before. I'm not going to go through it. I understand it's far too busy and far too detailed for a presentation slide. I do like to include it just as a reference point, because it's a nice counter that supports the strategic goals that we just spoke to as well. And this, if there's one question to ask of a technology department, you could take each of these headers, the strategy and governance, the people and resources, the financial budget planning, financial management, the service planning and architecture, infrastructure and operations, security and risk, our applications management, our data, and our what's called business intelligence, and our projects. And that will really give a good picture of where we're looking to move the needle in each of those areas. But like I say, I won't go through this in detail. It's really for your reference. So some ITL initiatives of recent months since we previously did the department update. And I've broken this out into supporting our schools and departments, technology refresh cycle and new asset management, governance to support the use of digital tools, and data visualization and analytics, and what we call digital security hygiene. So supporting our schools and departments. In the summer, we installed new high-end media labs in every high school. This was a need through the software that students are now working on with CAD-based software, video rendering software, and coding and development software. So we wanted to step up the need for this to be able to use these, continue to use for the future, these software in the high schools. And then we've listed a number of streamlining business re-engineering projects underway that were completed actually. Locker assignment application, online registration we launched for parent registration, student registrations. We extended our digital forms. Our inclusion for learning representatives at the recent board meeting presented on our student referrals app. And similar apps we've provided for other departments, fleet inspection app for facilities. We also launched a new Microsoft Bookings software for parent-teacher interviews. And then through the pandemic year, there was a great deal of support required in My Education BC around scheduling and data collections. So the ongoing work that the team provided in that area. We migrated our ERP, our HR, payroll, and finance software to from on-premise to our Canadian to the Canadian cloud, and we also extended our use of Microsoft 365 by moving to Exchange online email and implementing Teams video as another option for online video alongside Zoom. We have already introduced the network infrastructure project in previous meetings, so I'm not going to go through that in detail. However, we are also now extending that project into full asset management and inventory life cycling. And what that means is it starts with making sure we have an accurate inventory of technology within the schools. So we have been in the past few months creating a one place where we can actually report on inventory because it has been quite disparate in the past. So the team have done a fantastic job of pulling this together into a single view that we can query, a single database that we can now have really fulsome conversations with the schools and say, well, here's the level of technology within your school currently. This is what it would take to sustain that level of technology going forward. And here's a proposal for how we can make this sustainable. You'll see here, this was a slide from this asset management project, which just gives you a picture of the devices and the technology across the schools in the district. This slide speaks to our student to mobile device ratio. And you'll see what this tells us is for every 2 students, less than 2 students, there is a mobile device that's accessible in the classroom. So an excellent ratio of mobile devices, so we're talking iPads, Chromebooks primarily here, available to students in the classroom. The question now we need to ask is, what is the sustainable level of mobile device ratio? We've also provided governance to support digital tools. This was a significant undertaking, especially through the pandemic, as so much of the learning was augmented by digital tools and online learning. We have a very progressive way of introducing informed consent for parents and for students. And I think we've done a great job in that transparency before a family is using an online tool with a teacher, with a classroom, to fully understand, well, what is it that we're agreeing to here? And what does informed consent look like? How will the data be used? Where does the data reside? How can I delete my data should I choose to? Those kinds of questions that we complete in a privacy scan before releasing these tools for general usage with students. We also launched our data analytics platform called Microsoft Power BI. And the first project we did on this was visualizing elements related to the framework for enhancing student learning, which fed directly into the school growth plans. So this included such data as graduation rates, literacy and numeracy information, and student learning survey trends and analytics. And we've spoken about this before, digital security hygiene. So we have seen a significant increase in account compromise attempts. And this is in line with education and health sector and public sector more broadly. I think right now is a great opportunity to understand some of the risks when we look at Newfoundland Health and the cybersecurity incident that has been underway in the last week in Newfoundland, and the impact that that has on that organization, on those organizations. And so we can really learn from this in terms of what an extreme event looks like. That's quite a drastic example, unfortunately. I'll put in some information here. We've done a number of internal audits on security. One of them revealed that some staff accounts were using known leaked passwords. And just to be clear, we weren't able to see the passwords that were being used in this case. We were just able to compare whether they were the same as what had already been leaked on the internet, for example. And this allowed us to immediately contact the staff in question and say, please update your password and put in controls that will not allow a known leaked password to be used again on our systems. So we're really advancing our password control. And this slide also speaks to some of those simple steps we can take. There is significant investment that can happen in this area as well. But right now we're actually looking at what are the immediate best practices and controls we can improve and bring forward. So one of them is improved password control. Another is something called conditional access, and that speaks to knowing who is trying to sign into our services from outside of our network. And we will be introducing something called multi-factor authentication. You may be used to it with your bank, where if they're not sure who you are, you may get a text message saying, please just confirm who you are. So a number of areas where we're moving this forward to improve our digital hygiene. And this all goes along with building a security aware culture. We think this supports staff and their families at home as well as at work, which is a very important goal for us as a department, because it really is the modern world we're living in now. I end with some questions we have not fully answered. ITL staffing, we lost a member of staff through the most recent budget round. And as a department, we are taking on broader scope and newer conversations than we have historically through such things as privacy assessments and advanced cybersecurity projects. So that's something that I'd like to keep awareness of at the board level. We've also spoken to the budget to maintain levels of technology. So there is a cost to maintain technology, obviously, and we'll be bringing more information regarding that forward. I think there's more information around cybersecurity risk tolerance as an organization. So when you look at an event, as I referenced in Newfoundland, what is our tolerance as an organization to have certain services potentially unavailable for a certain amount of time? And I think there's more conversation to be had in that area. Advancing a privacy aware and security aware culture is a long-term goal. And it's not so much that that's a question that hasn't been fully answered. I think it's more just acknowledgement that that's a multi-year implementation and a multi-year goal. And then, of course, we do not want to lose sight of planning for innovation. And we look at the new technologies that are becoming available to classrooms around augmented reality, virtual reality, machine learning, a number of different areas that artificial intelligence that we really should also be understanding the potential value within the classroom, and then what would be the supports required to plan for those technologies and to sustain them and make them supportable. Thank you very much. I'd like to hand it over to any questions.
Thank you very much, Sandy, for all of that information. Do we have any questions? Trustee Painter.
Well, first off, thank you very much. Yeah, I was thinking of, there was a series of commercials I can remember from the old days, where it's like, you may not know our products, but we make the products that you use better, sort of thing. And it really kind of underlines just how information technology for learning is just underpinning so many different aspects of what the teachers are doing and how the students are learning. With respect to one slide you had on business intelligence, and you mentioned FESL. When it comes to literacy and numeracy inputs on that, is it specifically FSA results, or are we going broader than that?
Interim Associate Superintendent Roberts, would you like to speak to the content of the school growth plan data?
For the framework for enhancing student learning, on which we found the school growth plan, the assessment items or the data that's required are set by the Ministry of Education. So for literacy and numeracy at the elementary and middle levels, it is the foundation skills assessment. And for grades 10 and 12, it is the literacy assessments that are required for graduation. And likewise for numeracy at grade 10. But I think when we're talking about school level data, that's when schools have the capacity to look at other sources. But for the framework itself, no, those are predetermined by the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification there. And another tangential question. I've really been interested in what kind of data is stored away in MyEd, and I appreciate it's not appropriate for me to be, going right in there and getting the data. But are there manuals online or elsewhere that sort of lay out the structure of MyEd and what kind of content is in there?
Through the chair, I may need to bring that question back, Trustee Painter. Okay. I'm not sure off the top of my head what is available online. Depending on the depth of information, I know that, for example, schema of databases probably would not be shared from a security point of view. They may wish to keep that information private. but there may be information online available to the public regarding modules and what they cover. So I'd be happy to bring that back.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And no, I do respect the need for security. My focus is understanding it well enough that I can then turn around and ask questions of staff that, can be done in a, researched in a secure manner. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Trustee Hansen?
Thanks. Not a question so much as a comment. I've been getting a lot of feedback this year and last year about how convenient all the online forms are. And then this year with the teacher-parent interviews being online. And I know that generally parents are, every time there's one less piece of paper that comes home balled up in the bottom of the backpack, parents are happy. So thanks for the continued work with that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Canty, thank you so much for providing us with some detailed information about all the good work that you and the team are doing. I just wanted to sort of acknowledge where we were a few years ago and where we are now in terms of the sophistication with which our data management practices and our privacy practices, how they've evolved. I was particularly pleased to see the sort of innovative approach to managing consent that you and the team developed, and the proactive approach to data management and bringing some of that data storage within Canada. So thank you. Those efforts are certainly they're noticed and appreciated. I had a couple of questions around data analytics that's referenced in the report, and also around apps. So I wondered if you could give us a little bit more context and a further update around your progress in terms of I guess in terms of apps first and foremost, to kind of getting a handle on the sort of proliferation of app use across the district in the absence of privacy impact assessments, and sort of where you are as a team and how you're feeling about app use.
Mr. Canty?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. And thank you for the feedback. I will let the team know. So there's different types of applications, obviously. There are the digital tools in the classroom. So the process we have for that is we have a request process where teachers can request application, interest in an application, and say, hey, this would fit this need, and it goes through the educational lens, the pedagogical lens, and then if this is an application that is to be supported and there's enough interest in it, that's where it will trigger the privacy scan, where we reach out to the developer and we run the privacy assessment. And then from that information, decide, again, is this an application that can be brought forward, or are there too many concerns from a security or privacy point of view? And then from that information, an informed consent letter is created and put into the Parent Connect parent portal. So that's the process on the digital tools applications. Was your question also regarding internal kind of systems applications?
More so external apps. Yeah, it was more about external vendors and external apps. So I think you've answered my question. Thank you. My other question was around data analytics, and in particular, I would be interested to hear a little bit more about the kind of, I'm appreciating that the analytics in part you're referring to are some of the educational and things that have to do with the FESL data collection set. I'm more interested in, from a networking point of view, any data collection that we're doing around network use. And if we are collecting data around network use, how we're using that data.
Thank you. Through the chair. The Microsoft Power BI initiative was solely education focused. That's not to say it's a very competent platform to build any analytics on, but the year one was really focusing on the school growth plan and student achievement, and really just starting out to understand that platform and its capabilities. In terms of network usage, there is systems logging. We run servers, we run firewalls, we run networks. There is not usage reports to the same level that we put into this Power BI kind of targeted graphing trend analysis. The logging and reporting that takes place on the network side is very much focused on cybersecurity threats, threat analysis, account compromise analysis, and heuristics and behaviors on the network outside of what would be the normal usage of the network. So without knowing kind of what level of detail you're interested, I would answer that there is logging and analytics, and but it's for a very different purpose than the efforts we've put into the Microsoft Power BI data visualization platform.
Thank you, Mr. Penty. No, you did answer my question. I was in particular interested in just what you've highlighted, and I know that some organizations are getting more involved in network-specific analytics, and in particular, gleaning information around user-specific network use, which then prompts privacy impact assessments and personal data disclosures and so on. So I just wanted to kind of hear where we are as an organization around that. So thank you.
Thank you. And if I could follow up in terms of data strategy, that kind of transparency is incredibly important, because our department and the use of our technology is very much built on trust as well. So there's a very good understanding around the reasonable and responsible use of not just the technology, but also the data that it generates.
Thank you so much for your comments tonight. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Canty, for that report and all the questions that went along with it. We're going to move on now to, we have no public disclosures of in-camera items, so we're moving on to new business. So Trustee Hensa, you have a motion under H1.
I sure do. Sorry, I'm just getting myself organized here. Yes, my motion, Jordan and I put together about creating a rotating schedule of trustees to be invited to participate in the agenda setting meetings. And this was something that came up more than a year ago when we had one of our consultations. And sort of the point is to improve board dynamics, support organizational alignment to the strategic plan, which ultimately is to enhance student success and life chances. And I know we are becoming very well known for the length of our board meetings and the lateness of them. And I think one of the reasons that this happens sometimes is we tend to get a bit caught up in the details about how certain items come to be on our agenda before we're able to examine the merits of the agenda items. And it's my hope that by taking turns on the agenda setting meetings, or the chair superintendent meetings, however they're officially termed, it'll just help increase the transparency and hopefully improve the efficiency of our board meetings. So this is something I'm bringing forward, and I hope I have everybody's support.
Right. So the motion's on the floor, so I'll go to stakeholders first, and then trustees. Is there any stakeholders who wish to speak to this motion? Okay, seeing none. Trustee Duncan.
Jonathan's up there.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Thanks, Angie. I I've heard in the past, and I've heard in this meeting again just now, that it is a concern about the time of the meeting, that these meetings do tend to go very late, and a lot of work does get done in these meetings. I understand from these meetings that that is a concern that trustees have. As a parent, I honestly, personally, I don't have that concern, and I haven't really heard from other parents who have had that concern, that these meetings do need time and they do go late. And I think tonight is a good example where there was work to be done on a policy. I was very interested in seeing trustees do that work, and I am still interested in seeing trustees do that work. And I do think that these things do take time. So I'm just curious to know whether there is feedback publicly or in the report from Teresa Rozantsov and Mike McKay as to whether that is a concern that the public share, that these meetings do go late, that they do take time. Thank you.
I might address that first of all. So this was also not necessarily something to ask the public about, but to try to help trustees have more input into the agenda before it gets to the public and have them involved in the process. Because if you're not in a chair position and you're not in a vice chair position or chair one of the committees, then you are never privy to the agenda setting. And this was a way to include all trustees in that process. So to be more inclusive. So it wouldn't be something necessarily that we would seek public input on, because we were hoping that it would have buy-in for all of the trustees and make a more collegial team working forward with the agendas. So that was where it came from Teresa and Mike originally in the discussions.
Thank you. So just to confirm, it wasn't a concern in their report that these meetings do take time. And I understand that the rationale behind the motion that's about to go forward on the floor right now is that one of the rationale mentioned is that the meetings do take time, and this would be a way to make the meetings potentially shorter by involving trustees in the agenda setting. And I was confused about how that would work, how that would lessen the amount of time taken in the meetings. And I was also a little bit confused that that was a concern, that is part of the rationale, and wanted to know where that information was coming from. That's all.
Yeah, the time of the meetings wasn't the only concern. So it was brought forward as one of the concerns, because when you get to 11 o'clock at night and you're then extending it for another half hour and going to 11:30, the board has talked about it's not the best time of night to be making really important decisions. So we talked about how could we shorten the meeting, how could we have buy-in from all of the trustees. So it was a variety of issues that this recommendation came forward with. So are there any other speakers to the motion? Okay, I've got
Can I
Trustee
just
Duncan.
answer? Can
Yes.
I just throw my answer into Jonathan there? Just about your question about has there been feedback that from parents that the meetings are too long? And this isn't my sole purpose in bringing this motion forward, but I have had a lot of anecdotal, like I haven't got a report on it, but I have had lots of feedback from parents asking why we're still going past 10:30. It's something that's come up almost every time I have a conversation with a parent about a meeting.
Thanks for that answer. Is there, speaking of making seeing information in public, is there a way that the public can actually view the recommendations themselves and view the report to see to see where the background from this motion is coming from? I know there was confusion with a previous motion that also came from the report, and I think it would help the public understand what the board is doing if we could actually have the information that the board has when they're having this discussion as well. So are we able to actually see the text and the report that this recommendation, or sorry, this motion is based on?
From my recollection, it was an internal document from a board working session, not a public session, and not an official meeting of the board. So we would have to go back and take that under advisement. Whether that, I can't remember the whole context of the meeting, but it wasn't a public meeting. But we'll take that under advisement as something that we can look at. Trustee Duncan and then Trustee Painter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I actually have an amendment that I want to put forward, if I may. So after the last sentence in the motion, this board's term, I would like to add a new sentence. The chair and superintendent will ensure that a meeting agenda and minutes are made available to all trustees. And
Say
if I
that
may,
again. You can say that again, please.
oh, sorry, of course I can. The chair and superintendent will ensure that a meeting agenda and minutes are available, or made available rather, to all trustees.
What we get them. So what are you talking about? What are you trying to change that doesn't happen now?
We don't get an agenda and meeting minutes from the meeting that is the subject of this motion.
Okay.
So and if I may, I can certainly motivate and give you a rationale. So from my perspective, and I can only speak for myself, not my other 8 colleagues, but certainly one of the reasons that I expressed concern around the chair superintendent's meetings and what I perceive as a lack of transparency around the subject matter that is discussed, how things make it onto the agenda, other things don't. One of the main motivations from my perspective of having a trustee rotate in and out, or indeed an agenda and a set of minutes provided to trustees, is really around adding another layer of accountability and transparency. The agenda setting meetings are not just a process meeting. It's an incredibly important meeting because, of course, it sets the tone and there's decisions made about what goes onto the agenda. So, and both the superintendent and the chair are in that meeting in service to the entire board. And I think it really behooves us to align our practices when it comes to agenda setting and minute taking. And really adhere to best practice in the public sector and ensure that this very important meeting has an agenda and has a set of minutes. And I think that is just a complement to having trustees rotating in and out, which was the specific or one of the pieces or one of the recommendations that the consultants provided in early spring. So hopefully it's clear why it's relevant and how it complements the motion. But I'm happy to clarify if my colleagues have any questions or concerns about the amendment.
Speakers to the amendment? Trustee Henson?
Yes, sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around this. I see where you're coming from. My concern is that this seems like it would be a lot of setting the agenda, making an agenda for the agenda setting committee, whether or not there's rotating trustees or not, seems like a lot of work. But that's me not having been to one. So I'm probably not the best person. And it seems like the agenda coming out of it is pretty much the minutes. Like that's what's being produced. I'm just struggling to understand what would be on the minutes aside from the production of the agenda. Thank you.
Trustee Painter?
Chair, did you want me to speak to that? Query or question?
No, let's go to Trustee Painter first, and then we'll go back to you.
I'm on the speakers list for the base motion.
The main motion.
Yeah.
Okay. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I don't agree that setting an agenda and taking a minute of a meeting is onerous. I think it should just be a standard practice when you're having a meeting and in a professional environment where decisions are being made about what to include on a board agenda. I think a good example of why it wouldn't just be the agenda that's set. The minute is not just the minute of the meeting, because at that meeting decisions are made about what to include, not just what to include on the agenda, what to include in the packet, what not to include. All of those all of those decisions really and actions could be and should be, in my view, noted in a minute of a meeting. My understanding as well is that it has been the practice of previous or past board chairs to produce a minute. So it's not as though it hasn't happened. I think it's just a choice. But what I'm suggesting is that along with including other trustees on a rotational basis in the exercise of producing a board agenda, that we also add in a layer of best practice. So for instance, if a trustee doesn't wish to take part in a rotation, but actually wants to know what's gone on during the agenda setting meeting, they'll be able to refer to both the agenda for that meeting and the set of minutes. And I would also just say that, I think it's not just a best practice across the public sector, but it's the direction that thankfully we're moving as a culture. When you look to our ad hoc committees and the fact that we're now producing agendas and minutes and we're publishing those, it just adds a very basic layer of accountability and transparency. And so I think it does complement the motion on the floor, which, by the way, I do support.
Okay, I'm putting myself on the speakers list. So having been to a number of these meetings, when Trustee Henza said it was hard for her to comment because she had not, I'm not in favor of the amendment because I think that's, you can have 2 or 3 trustees already at the meeting, the chair, the vice chair, and the chair of a committee, which is 3 trustees right there if they all choose to attend, which they can. And then if you're including a 4th trustee there is lots of discussion about what's going to go on the agenda. And I don't think sending out, and as you're right, some things go on, some things don't. It's a timing issue, the packages aren't ready. There's a lot of issues about why something is not ready to go on the agenda, which the trustees make at that table. And so I am not in favor of sending out all of the pack up, all of the minutes, all of the agenda items ahead of time, because that's the rationale for having that meeting and having them get together to figure out what the trustees will need to make a decision when the agenda comes to the committee or the board. Now, I would expect, which we have always tried to do when I've been at these meetings, to make sure that trustees will have all of the information needed at those meetings in order to make the decision and deliberate. So that's what those committees are set up to do. Including a rotating trustee was a level of including trustees who have never been to that table before, to give them some experience, to have them involved at the beginning level. And I think that I can support the main motion, but I cannot support the amendment that's on the floor. So having finished my conversation, I'll let Trustee Duncan close to the amendment.
Yeah, I guess thank you to my colleagues for their input and feedback. What I would say is that, I'm hopeful that rather than sort of see setting an agenda or producing a minute as onerous or unnecessary, that we see the value in terms of the accountability, transparency that it brings, but also the trust that it brings. I know that previous board chairs have done this, and the anecdotal comments around that practice that I received was that it was very beneficial and it increased the level of trust and engagement with their board colleagues. So, I hope that folks can support that. I guess the only other thing I would say is that my understanding, having participated in these meetings previously, is that there is an agenda already. It's just a matter of sharing that out. What's not produced is a minute. So just if that gives anybody some level of comfort about their concerns around that proposed amendment being onerous.
Okay, so we'll call the question on the amendment, and the amendment is to have the chair and superintendent to ensure that the minutes and agenda are made available to all trustees prior to the agenda setting meeting. All those in favor of the motion? Trustee Duncan, Trustee Painter, those opposed? Trustee Leonard, Trustee Henza, and the motion fails. Okay, we're back to the main motion. Any other speakers? Trustee Painter.
All right. Yeah, with respect to the Trustee Duncan's last comments, I do recall in the past when one of our former chairs from a previous term, Edith Loring Kahunga, did actually provide us with summaries of the meetings that she had with the superintendent when it came to setting the board agenda, and I found that to be quite productive. Jude covered it off in her chair's report, and that would, sort of get everyone up to speed. In my mind, the biggest issue that I have with this, and I have no particular concerns with the idea of a rotating schedule of trustees. My concern is more about why these meetings are getting to the point where it feels like information is being shared that is not being shared to all trustees, or anything else. I'm frankly at a loss. To me, in my experience when I was ops chair, is that I would get on the phone once a month to the secretary treasurer at the time, and we would talk for about 5 minutes, and I'd be advised about what initiatives were coming forward that needed to be addressed. And typically a lot of those were already on a reporting schedule required by the ministry. So it was really easy to predict when they'd be coming forward. And then it would be any policies or any motions coming forward from the board and trustees or committee members at that point. And it was a yes or a no, and that would be about it. Because in my mind, that's all that needs to be discussed prior to the meeting. There's no need for sharing of anything beyond that, simply because that's all substance for the board meeting or the committee meeting in question. So my preference would actually be to significantly scale back the scope of these meetings to the point where it's, the leading staff person, if it's a deputy superintendent for ed policy and the secretary treasurer for ops or whatever it's going to be, that individual and the chair can get together. They can spend 10 minutes confirming what the timeline is for the proposed agenda. And, it generally has already been drafted at that point. And perhaps at the board meeting, there may be some additional need for both the superintendent and the secretary treasurer to meet with the chair and the vice chair. But again, it should be just strictly limited to what do we need to accomplish to meet our reporting obligations to
You froze, Trustee Painter. Are
the
you
ministry
Trustee Painter, you're frozen.
or something.
Okay, you're back.
Okay, there. Anyway, I do my best talking when I'm frozen. Basically, it comes down to, I think, making these meetings more abridged and focusing that information on the committee or board meeting is probably all around, in my mind, a better way to go. But if people want to attend these sessions, then I have no significant opposition to it.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I think we're ready to call the question then. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's unanimous. So that's going forward to the board meeting at the end of the month. Thank you very much for everybody's input. H2 shops update. Now, this was on the agenda because it was referred from the February meeting to the March meeting last year. And then it was referred from the March meeting to last month's meeting, but it didn't make it onto the agenda. So we brought it forward tonight. Trustee Duncan, did you still wish to have it on the agenda this evening?
Yeah, through the chair, I guess to my colleagues and to staff present, I appreciate you picking up on that and putting it on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, we didn't lose it, so it's back here.
No, I appreciate that. I'm glad it didn't get lost. And just to clarify, my understanding was that it was tabled twice in February and then again in March, on the understanding that the items listed in the motion were, there was an expectation that those items were going to be addressed. And so I was happy to kind of to table it a couple of times to allow the work needed to be undertaken to be done, and then for us to review after that work was completed where we're at. And so there was a commitment that in October that we would have some reporting around where we are, sort of a status update, which we've received tonight. I suppose my concern, frankly, and again, I would appreciate a steer from staff in particular on this. I guess my concern is that it's the same concern I had in the spring. My concern is that these items and our tracking of where we're at, that it continues to happen. I know that these items have not all been addressed at every shop, in all 17 shops. So what I heard tonight was that there's no concern about that in terms of from a funding perspective, because these items are considered items that each school should fund. And so I guess I'm really looking to staff to clarify that the items listed in the motion that's been tabled a couple of times, although haven't all been addressed, that there is in fact funding that's going to, that's in place, and some level of follow-up, reporting to confirm when it's done.
Secretary Treasurer?
I can confirm that is in place and will happen.
And so through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer, can we expect, do I have to, put a motion on the floor to have that reporting come back through ops when all those items are in fact addressed at each school? Or is it just a part of the regular planned reporting already?
I would see this as part of the operational plans that we do every day with our schools. The audit's been brought to our attention. We've reported out on it twice. We've got administrative procedures around it, and we have district allocations to schools. And so we would consider the matter operationalized. And as a staff, we will continue to operationalize that into the future.
Okay, well, through the chair, thank you to the Secretary Treasurer for clarifying that. I guess I'm now looking to my trustee colleagues. I frankly, I don't agree that it is a purely operational matter. I think that this is a matter of health and safety risk to students, and it absolutely is the responsibility of this board to provide adequate oversight to ensure that these items and the remediations needed are in fact carried out. This has gone on for a number of years, and many of the items that will require long-term funding will need to be addressed over as many as 12 years. So I guess what I would say is that I will review where we're at and then consider bringing forward an appropriate motion to ensure that we do get reporting on an ongoing basis until all of the remediations have been addressed. So I will, with a great deal of hesitance.
Maybe I could ask the Secretary Treasurer if there's a natural time in a calendar year when an update could be brought forward on where we're at with the shops. It would probably maybe be attached to Mr. Morris's report someplace along the line, but is there a natural time in the year where you could see this falling under?
I would say, given the significant investment that needs to be made, either by the board through its operating budget, capital budget, local capital, or application to the ministry, that a natural place for this to reside would be at the budget committee.
Okay. So maybe we can, when we start our budget committee meetings, we can bring that forward as one of the items that we'd like to discuss. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I appreciate the suggestion, Trustee Leonard, and to the Secretary Treasurer as well. I think that that's one place where we as a board should be discussing allocation of the necessary funding. But again, my concern is that we're not going to be getting into the detail of what's been remediated and what hasn't at a budget committee level. And so I guess what I'm looking at, although I appreciate the suggestion and I think it's a helpful one, I guess what I'm looking for is a commitment to have regular reporting brought forward through ops to confirm where we are. And, by year end that each of the schools has got the remediations that are listed in the motions in the shops, and what the plan is for the longer term funding requirement for things like ventilation and extraction devices and so on. So I don't want to see it slip off the agenda again, like it did the previous board. I want to keep it in our focus until we see the work through. And so if it's not reporting, or if that's not something we can just agree to do, then I can bring a revised motion, I suppose, to the board.
Okay, we look forward to that then. Thank you
Okay,
very
so I'll withdraw my motion tonight, and I will bring a revised motion to the board to ensure that we get regular reporting.
Okey doke. Thank you very much. We have no notices of motion for this evening. We have no general announcements, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Trustee Hensa, thank you very much. All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.